This video is sponsored by War Thunder. More about them a little later.
Imagine if you had to break this with a pickaxe. That would be silly.
Hey friends, this is part of my ongoing series trying to figure out exactly how much weight Minecraft Steve can lift. Watching the rest of the series is not necessary for watching this one, but if you're interested, it'll all be linked in the description and at the end of the video. Feel free to subscribe while you're down there. Here's where we are so far. In the first episode, we figured out that water is very heavy, but not infinite. Then, we stuffed a bunch of it in sponges, stuffed those sponges in bundles, stuffed those bundles in shulker boxes, put on the heaviest armor we could find, dyed the storage, trimmed the armor, enchanted the armor, and renamed everything. Then last episode, we pelted Mark with arrows, swarmed him with bees, invited millions of our closest friends onto a server, and constructed the long-awaited boatstack, in order to push Steve's limit past the weight of most stars. This time I want to revisit some stuff, handle a few heavily requested things, and maybe try and make a bigger, better boatstack. If you're new or need a refresher, here are the 3 main rules this series follows. First, I think infinity is lame, and we'll be avoiding it. Really, I just think it makes the question boring. Second, to simplify the math, I am assuming conservation of mass usually. There are a few exceptions. And third, for now, we're sticking to unmodified vanilla survival Minecraft. But don't worry, the numbers get ridiculous enough even without commands and stuff. So, let's continue to answer the question, how powerful is Minecraft Steve? I think a good place to start might be by taking another look at the bundle. Last time I covered bundles, it was way back in the 3rd episode of the series, and in that video, I made so many mistakes that I've now spent 3 more videos correcting them. Really not my best work. At the time, I figured out how big a bundle would need to be to hold 64 beds by taking a crack at an unsolved mathematical conundrum called the packing problem. But then I found out that beds aren't stackable, and thought that meant the most volume a bundle would need to hold is 64 regular blocks, and solving the packing problem with 64 cubes is kinda boring. Since that video's gone up, a lot of people have chimed in with other non-cube things that I may have forgotten, so let's go through them. First up is dragon heads and decorated pots. Both of them have abnormal models that do break out of the normal block grid, but their hitboxes are both smaller than normal blocks, meaning it would actually take up less space to store a full stack of them if all the empty space was removed, which I'm assuming it would be since there's no block grid inside the bundle. Armor stands were another suggestion, but they also have a major problem. They're entities, meaning they can do this. A more popular comment was about end crystals, but they share the same issue. Some folks brought up doors, and we're getting closer, but despite being 2 blocks tall, a door's hitbox is still pretty small. It takes up less total space than a half slab, and if you remove the empty space, like we've been doing, you can fit 5 of them in a 2-block space. The final suggestion was double tall flowers, like peonies. The problem with those is that, damn, you got me. The model appears to be pretty small, with plenty of empty space, and you can walk through it the same way you can with entities, but since I've been judging the rest of the options on their hitboxes, that's 2 full blocks right there. If you didn't like my reasoning for the doors, those also work. Back to the packing problem, fitting 64 1x1x2 cuboids in the smallest possible space is a little more complicated than doing the same thing with regular cubes, and like I said before, this is a largely unsolved problem in math, so there's no easy formula for it, and I'm not going to be the one to change that. But, unlike some applications of the generalized packing problem, what we're interested in is minimizing the surface area, because what we're trying to find is the smallest amount of leather we need to wrap around it to make a bundle. There's a principle in geometry called isoparametric inequality, which is a really complicated name for the simple idea that for a given volume, say 128 cubic meters, different shapes with that volume will have different surface areas. And consistently, the lowest surface area for any given volume is a sphere. So we want to pack our peonies as spherically as possible. Here's what I came up with. This shape is a good bit more complex than the tetradecahedron arrangements I was using for the beds, but it has a surface area of 184 square meters, which is as small as I could get it. But we still aren't quite done yet. While this is roughly the shape the flowers would take inside the bag, it isn't the shape of the bag itself, because if we wrap leather around a concave shape like this, it would go right over all these little corners, which takes less leather than fully coating them would. To figure out the true minimum surface area we need, we can take our shape and figure out its convex hull. A convex hull is the smallest convex shape needed to contain another, more irregular one. Imagine if we shrink-wrapped the thing. The convex hull would be the shape of the shrink-wrap. Luckily, unlike the packing problem, finding the convex hull of any shape does have a known algorithm. And more luckily, someone else has already done all the work. Shout out to that guy. If we open CAD, model our ball of flowers, and run that through the script, we find that the minimum internal surface area of the Minecraft bundle is 156 square meters, over 50% bigger than before. That's the area of how much leather we need, but to weigh it, we need the volume. A normal coin purse style leather bag, which is what the bundle appears to be based on, typically uses 3-ounce leather, which has a thickness just under 1.2 millimeters. But the internal volume of those bags maxes out at around 2 liters, or 0.002 cubic meters, while the volume of our bundle has around 167 cubic meters, over 80,000 times bigger. So we should probably scale up that thickness a little. If you want to scale a 3-dimensional value like volume by a given amount, then, according to something called the square cube law, a 1-dimensional value like thickness should scale by the cube root of that amount. The cube root of 83,500 is around 43.7, so if we multiply our 1.2mm thickness by 43.7, we get the adjusted thickness of the giant coin purse that is the bundle being 52.4mm or 0.0524 meters thick. Multiply the thickness by our 156 square meter surface area to find that making this bundle requires this one piece of leather to be 8.19 cubic meters. The density of leather is roughly 860 kilograms per cubic meter, making the mass of one leather item a little under 7,000 kilograms. These cows must be heavy. There is some excess material past the drawstring, so consider that number more of a minimum. Speaking of the string, a few commenters had some thoughts on that too. Last time I covered it, I calculated its volume using its placed texture and then assumed that it was spider silk. Starting with the volume, a bunch of people commented that it could also be 1/4 of a cubic meter because of the wool recipe, but that seems like a bit of a stretch. In real life, wool is super airy, upwards of 90% air by volume in some cases, and we know this is also true of Minecraft wool because it dampens vibrations before they reach skulk sensors, and that property is directly related to how loose it is. But even without wool, I can still figure out a bigger volume for the string by using leads. Unlike when that previous video came out, now leads are crafted with nothing but 5 string, meaning it should be 5 times as big as 1 string. The lead can normally stretch up to 12 blocks in length, but if a happy ghast is at one end of it, it can get a little longer, up to 16 blocks, so I'll consider that the true length. It doesn't have a 3D model, but being vaguely rope-like, we can assume it's roughly cylindrical. And taking a closer look at the texture, it appears to have a diameter of a single pixel. These pixels are the same size as block pixels, meaning it has a radius of 0.5 pixels or 1/32 meters, and each string has 1/5 of the total length, or 3.2 meters. From there, we can calculate the volume with this formula, and working through it gives us the approximate volume of each string as just under 0.01 meters. The density of spider silk is 1,300 kilograms per cubic meter on average, for a total mass of 12.8 kilograms. That is, if it's spider silk. Because, while I discounted striders as an option, plenty of commenters brought up that cats can also drop string. I always thought that when cats drop string, it was supposed to be yarn, cause cats like yarn. And yarn isn't as heavy as spider silk, but you guys had other ideas, like that it might be cat fur, or whiskers, or sinew. Gross. So, I guess let me know in the comments what you think cats dropping string represents, and maybe I'll come back to it. Now that I'm finally done correcting one video, we can move on to correcting another one. Last time, we weighed arrows, tridents, and bee stingers, all the things you can have stuck in your model. I dug into the source code and discovered that you can't have the maximum number of tridents and arrows at the same time, since they share a counter. Bee stingers have a separate counter, but as a few folks pointed out, and as I addressed in a short, you also can't share those because getting the maximum number of any of them involves monopolizing the damage windows between invincibility frames. All that means, while we can have 58 of any of those things stuck in Steve at a given time, to maximize the weight, we have to figure out which of them is the heaviest and have 58 of those. Check out that video to see why it's 58. Bee stingers are pretty clearly out, and last time I thought arrows were heavier for a few reasons. Players can fire arrows into you, but not tridents, which only stick when thrown by drowned, and when enchanting or renaming as a player, you can be super inefficient by using higher levels, putting more XP into them, making them weigh more. Meaning, even though a trident is heavier than an arrow, if a player uses their levels as stupidly as possible, a renamed arrow will probably be heavier than a naturally spawned drowned trident. These friends all asked, what if we just don't use a naturally spawned trident? We could get a trident ourselves, rename it like an arrow, enchant it in the least XP efficient way possible, and then give it to a drowned and let them throw duplicates of it. And I have to be honest, I just straight up forgot that drowned could pick up and use player tridents. That's on me. Last video, we used fluid dynamics to measure the mass of the trident as being 2,000 kilograms, and we already know that if we rename an item at level 238,609,312, the maximum level possible in survival mode, the XP adds 2 billion kilograms of mass. Speaking of massive, impactful experiences, let's talk about today's sponsor, War Thunder. If you somehow don't already know, or just heard a passing joke about some documents here and there, War Thunder is a super expansive PvP vehicle combat game. They've got thousands of machines spanning land, air, and sea, and ranging from things used 100 years ago to stuff still in use today. And even with that variety, and with the very in-depth customization they let you do on top of it all, this game doesn't sacrifice a scrap of realism. Not only does every single model have individual simulated components that take damage differently, but when one is destroyed, you get this cool little X-ray that shows exactly what happened and how. Look at that. Look how cool that is. For a grand total of $0, you get 3 game modes of varying realism anywhere from hardcore to arcadey, and it's so optimized in Resource Light that they managed to launch a mobile version on top of pretty much every other console. If you're a new player or haven't played in 6 months, and if you play on PC or console, you'll even get a bonus pack with a bunch of goodies like an XP booster, some premium vehicles, and more. So, if you want to join the 95 million player community, check out the links in the description and the pinned comment, and play free today. Now back to the trident. In order to enchant it, we have to figure out which enchantments let us waste the most levels, like we did for the armor. Tridents have 4 unique enchantments. Channeling and Loyalty are both mutually exclusive with Riptide, and they can also have Mending, Unbreaking, and Curse of Vanishing. Most of the cost of making our final trident will come from using the anvil, so on-screen is a quick refresher on how anvil costs work. I do want to point out one thing here though, with this chart on the wiki. It says the enchantment multiplier for loyalty is 1 both for a book and for an item, meaning it should cost 1 level per level of loyalty either way. But that's just wrong. It costs 2 levels per level if it's coming from an item. This is why I check everything in game. Anyway, I've gone over all this once before when making the armor, so to avoid wasting time, here's what I got for how to enchant a trident in the least efficient way possible. First, grind to the maximum level and remember to regrind all lost levels between every step. Then, acquire 15 tridents and an enchanted book with Curse of Vanishing. Place the curse on one of the tridents and do level 1 enchantments at the table on 13 of the tridents until you get 8 with Impaling 1, 4 with Unbreaking 1, and 1 with Channeling. Then do a level 3 enchantment on the last one and get Loyalty 3. If at any point you don't get the enchantment you need, find another trident and try again. Damage all the tridents slightly, combine the 8 Impaling 1 tridents into 4 Impaling 2 tridents, and combine the Curse of Vanishing trident onto the Channeling one. Damage all the new ones, then combine the Impaling 2 tridents onto the Unbreaking ones. Make sure Impaling is on the right to make 4 Impaling 2 Unbreaking 1 tridents. Damage them, combine them into 2 Impaling 3 Unbreaking 2 tridents, don't damage them, and combine those into 1 Impaling 4 Unbreaking 3 trident. Damage it, combine the Channeling Curse of Vanishing trident onto it, damage that, combine the Loyalty 3 one onto it, and finally, give it a funny name. If you did everything right, all of those operations should stay under 40 levels, and cost a total of 218 levels. And if you remember to keep regrinding to the max level, this final trident should represent 15 tridents, 16 lapis lazuli, 1 book, and over 3.2 trillion experience points. We already weighed the tridents, and as I went over in another short, when combining stuff with an anvil, you all convinced me to make a minor exception to my conservation of mass rule, so we're only keeping 1 trident of mass. The lapis we've been over a few times now, they have a mass of about 322 kilograms each, and the book we've also been over. But now we have a new estimate for how much mass a single piece of leather has, making the new book over 7,000 kilograms. It's a big book. For the XP, when pure, that much experience would be represented by 1.3 billion of the largest XP orb and these 7 smaller orbs, which altogether would have a mass of 3 trillion kilograms, making the whole trident very slightly more than that. If we used Drown to stick him with 58 of those tridents, that means Pincushion Steve would be carrying around 175 trillion kilograms in tridents alone. While we're on the topic of renaming, last time I pulled the comments with a question. If you rename 64 items to have the same name, the end result is the exact same as if you renamed the stack. The only difference is that it takes 64 levels instead of 1. So, should it add 64 levels of weight, or just the 1? As of the writing of this video, the results are not close. 104 voters think that the stack gains 64 levels of weight, while 18 disagree. A handful of observant folks even chimed in to mention that it doesn't really even matter, since we're keeping all of our stacks in bundles anyway, and bundles allow differently named items. Good point. If you're curious about how much XP weighs, why it weighs anything, or how I weighed it, check out this video about the armor. Let's handle some new stuff now. First up is this comment by Don't Dox Me Please 7805. I hope that doesn't count. She suggested using the density of salt water for the mass of the sponges, since we can access things like oceans where you'd expect the water to be salty. Compared to the rough density of fresh water being 1,000 kilograms per cubic meter, salt water comes in at 1,025, making each water source block 2.5% heavier, and making each full sponge go from 258 quadrillion kilograms to 265 quadrillion kilograms. Easy enough? Next up is a very popular suggestion: parrots. Here's a parrot. You can tame them with any kind of seeds, they come in a few different colors, and up to 2 can sit on your shoulders. A few things make them get off your shoulders, but entering the crawling state is not one of them. That'll be important for later. Now let's measure them. By height, the parrot is a little under 0.7 blocks tall, but the standard way to measure birds is by length. And if we do that, the parrot is 13 block scale pixels long, or 81.25 centimeters. According to the wiki, the 5 colors of parrots are based on these 5 real-world birds, and according to my research, of those 5, the only ones that you'd expect to be 80 centimeters when fully grown are the scarlet macaw that inspired the red parrot, or the blue and yellow macaw that inspired the cyan parrot. In both of those cases, a reasonable estimate for an 80 centimeters adult is around 1 kilogram, so we can safely assume our in-game parrots are somewhere around that. Like I said, to tame them we need seeds, so I guess we can measure those too. We've got a few options. Out of them, pumpkin seeds are probably the heaviest at around 1 gram apiece, and there's 7 pumpkin seeds per seed item. With a 10% success chance, we can expect to tame a parrot after an average of 10 attempts or 70 seeds. 70 seeds are 0.07 kilograms, which is not significant, especially since, as we'll go over in a bit, even in Minecraft, animals probably don't keep all the mass they eat. On top of that, after they're tamed, the only thing you can still feed parrots kills them, so I think they'll stay around 1 kilogram each. On to the next suggestion, and one of the most popular ones that I've been getting for a while now. Let's finally handle food. First, let me clear up a misconception. A lot of people seem to think that since Steve never uses a restroom, everything he consumes stays part of his body. And first of all, how do you know? Can you smell him? Second of all, while it's easy to come to that conclusion, it's important to note that not everything you eat comes out the other end. Some of it you breathe out in the form of carbon dioxide. That's where the carbon comes from. And it's not like some small percentage either. Most of the mass you consume, sometimes more than 70% of it, exits through your lungs. Since we know that Steve does need to breathe, it's safe to assume that he loses weight in much the same way, especially with how active he is. If he were a normal human, we'd still expect there to be some kind of waste for anything he can't fully digest, but considering he weighs 15 tons, benches stars without breaking a sweat, and eats large amounts of gold without issue, I think we're a little past the idea that Steve is a normal human. Speaking of gold, as many people correctly pointed out, the heaviest meal Steve could load up on is almost certainly the enchanted golden apple. Once upon a time, these could be crafted using 8 blocks of gold. That crafting recipe is no longer in the game, but we could time travel. Since Java Edition fully supports switching versions, that means if we made an instance back in 1.8, started a new world, crafted some notch apples, and then updated back up to the current version, we'd still have the crafted apples, and it wouldn't require commands, creative mode, or modifying the game, so it technically follows our rules. Plus, as a few folks pointed out, I already did something similar back in the very first video. Oh yeah. The mass of the gold is pretty simple. 8 blocks are 8 cubic meters, the density of gold is 19,320 kilograms per cubic meter, for a total gold mass of 155,000 kilograms. The mass of the apple is less simple. There's little indication of what kind of apple this is, or how big it is. They come from oak trees, but normal earth oak trees don't produce apples, not ones that look like this anyway. So instead, we have to do the next best thing. All food in Minecraft has 2 important values, hunger points and saturation points, and the way they both work is pretty similar to the real-world metrics of calories and satiety. Calories are how much energy you get for jumping around and stuff, and satiety is how full food makes you feel and how long it keeps you from being hungry again. That means, since most basic foods, like apples, have a pretty consistent caloric density, which is how many calories are in each kilogram of apple, theoretically we can weigh those apples, or any Minecraft food, by figuring out the conversion rate between calories and hunger points. To do that, first we need to find a food that has both a measurable 3D model in-game and an easy real-world equivalent. For the first one, as far as I can tell, there are only 3 options: the cake, the poisonous potato block, and the melon. The cake is a little too complicated, the recipe has several ingredients, the model appears to have even more ingredients, and like I said, this works better with more basic foods. The poisonous potato block only appears in the April Fool's snapshot 24W14 potato, and while I do want to cover a lot of April Fool's features, especially now that time travel is back on the table, I think they'll need their own video. That leaves us with the melon, a full placeable block comprised of 9 edible slices that is pretty clearly based on specifically a watermelon. There are other melons with green rind and red flesh, but they're all either super obscure or not nearly this vibrant. If we take a closer look at a Minecraft melon slice, we can count that there's 46 pixels of flesh and 60 pixels of rind, making each slice 43.4% flesh. Since all the slices are identical, those percentages should be the same for the full block, making it 0.434 cubic meters of flesh and 0.566 cubic meters of rind. Watermelons have a density of 960 kilograms per cubic meter and a caloric density of 300 calories per kilogram for flesh and 100 calories per kilogram for rind, meaning a full melon block should be 417 kilograms or 125,000 calories of flesh and 594 kilograms or 59,000 calories of rind, for a total of 184,422 calories. The 9 slices that make it up each restore 2 hunger points for a total of 18 hunger points, making each one represent 10,246 calories and giving Steve a superhuman metabolism to go with his superhuman strength. Now back to apples. They restore 4 hunger points, or 41,000 calories, and apples have an average caloric density of 520 calories per kilogram, making this an 80 kilogram apple, and making this slightly heavier than it was with just the gold. Like I said, they restore 4 hunger, so on an empty stomach you can eat 5 of them and be full. But, unlike most foods, since they double as status items, you can continue eating them even if you are full. Eating an enchanted golden apple gives you a bunch of buffs of varying length. But since the longest ones last 5 minutes, I think we can safely interpret 5 minutes as the amount of time it takes Steve to fully metabolize the apple, similar to how the effects of caffeine or alcohol wear off. That means the maximum number of golden apples that Steve can be digesting at a given time is however many he can scarf down in those 5 minutes. It takes 1.61 seconds to eat a single piece of most foods, meaning over the course of 5 minutes you could stuff yourself with 186 enchanted golden apples, or almost 29 million kilograms of food. While we're talking about consuming things, I need your help. I wanted to cover potions in this video, but I hit a bit of a dead end. Here's all the possible ingredients for potions, and with the help of the brilliant friends on my Discord server, so far we've managed to figure out how to weigh all of these things. With these ones all having very solid estimates, and these ones being weighable with the Education Edition material reducer block. I used it in the past for things like netherrack, but some of its recipes are questionable, so it's more of a last resort. If you have any ideas what a real-world equivalent to any of these items could be, or any other ideas on how to weigh them, let me know in the comments. On a related note, if you have any ideas about these Terraria potion ingredients, let me know about those too. For now, that's everything we're giving Steve to carry on his person, so we can total it all up. If we fill our sponges with salt water, fill our bundles, fill our shulkers, fill our inventory, dye everything, name everything, don our heaviest armor, grind to the maximum level, make friends with some birds, sell weapons to the drowned, get stuck with 58 tridents, and fill up on golden apples, then, after accounting for gravity, Steve would be lifting 55 sextillion, 239 quintillion, 872 quadrillion, 106 trillion, 470 billion, 21,754,635 kilograms. Which is 543 zeta newtons, 122 sextillion pounds, and 46.2 quintillion 2005 elantras. That's a little over 4 times the weight of Pluto, which is a lot, but it isn't much more than the heaviest inventory we had last time. And that's because, unless we find something heavier than the sponges, we probably won't see this total grow much more. Luckily, that total isn't the most that Steve can lift, because we still have to deal with the boatstack. I also got a lot of suggestions for this, but first let me cover the other poll I did from last time. This is a big one. I asked, for the remainder of the series, if I should stick to weights that are practically possible for somebody to do in a Minecraft world, like carrying a few friends and boats, or if I should push everything to the theoretical maximum of what Steve can really do, like having 40 million players in the boatstack the way I did at the end of last video. This one also wasn't very close. By my count, there's 33 votes for the practical maximum, and 322 for the theoretical. Damn. That's good for me because, despite what you might expect, the theoretical answer is a good bit easier to figure out. Since the only limit is what's technically possible, it doesn't matter how many people we know, or how many players our server can handle, or even how many humans exist on this planet. That one will be important. Here's a new question for you all. I mentioned doing a separate video to take a look at Minecraft's various April Fool's versions, since there's a lot of wacky stuff in them, but I'm not sure if I should count all that stuff for this series. Like, if any of it ends up changing the total weight, should that count as part of the strength of normal Steve? Or should I instead treat it like an alternate Steve and handle it separately at the end, like how I plan to do creative mode at some point? Or as a third option, maybe you think it's a terrible idea and I shouldn't do a video like that at all. Either way, let me know. First suggestion to improve the boat stack is to have all players, except Steve, lie down on top of the boats instead of sitting inside them. And that does let us fit more players per layer of our boat stack, but it also brings up an issue, because there really isn't a limit on how many people can fit on a boat if everyone sneaks. So far, every time something has seemed limitless, I've managed to figure out an alternate interpretation that avoids it. Water sources are highly compressible and self-replicating, naming XP is lost on crafting, redundant dyes are scraped off, and cows produce milk via filter feeding, and you can't prove they don't. But here, I got nothing. I'm still not counting it as infinite, that'd go against the rules, but this time around, the only reason I have is I don't wanna. So instead, we'll fit as many people as possible in each layer without overlapping their hitboxes. Another thing we can have all the non-Steve players do is utilize the 5 pseudo-inventory slots they have in their crafting grids and cursor to hold even more shulker boxes. This has been requested for a while, and I haven't included it yet because all of those items drop if you ever close your inventory. But now, since we have a bunch of people sitting perfectly still on top of boats anyway, we might as well pack them with some extra weight. As far as those boats go, a common suggestion has been to put minecarts in all of them. And while this is technically a bug, that isn't even the only issue. Because when you put a minecart in a boat, it's slightly taller than a normal boat. That's important because the boats, even with minecarts, won't weigh nearly as much as squeezing more players in. So, to get the weight as high as possible, we can't do anything that would lower the total number of layers in our boat stack. That doesn't mean we can't put anything in the boats. As Discord user RainKitty figured out, any entity shorter than 0.375 meters can stay in a boat without changing the height of the combined hitbox at all. Here are all the mobs that are short enough. These ones can't go in boats, and I don't think I can weigh this one on account of not being real. We can't prevent the baby turtles from growing up, and when they do, they're slightly too tall. Plus, if I had to guess, a bug this big is probably heavier than a turtle this small. So let's measure the silverfish. It's 17 pixels long, and it looks like they're the same size as block pixels, making it 1.0625 meters long. A normal Earth silverfish is 15 millimeters long and weighs 15 milligrams, making the Minecraft one 70.83 times as long. Since mass scales with volume, we can expect it to weigh 70.83 cubed times as much, or 5.33 kilograms. That is a horrifyingly large insect. Throw 2 of them in every boat, and make all of our stacked players deal with the attacks. Now we need to rethink how many stacked players there are. First off, last time we stood Steve at the bottom layer of bedrock, but as commenter Rody Jansen 8836 pointed out, we can move that bedrock layer down quite a bit by using the same max height custom worlds that we did to measure our water. And we don't even have to stop there. A lot of people asked about breaking that bedrock to go even lower. Even though it's been in the game a long time, with no sign of being patched out, breaking bedrock is confirmed to be a bug though. But we don't even need to break it. As Discord user Nibifeftica pointed out, if we're using a custom world anyway, we can just take out that layer on generation. Nice. That means now, the area we have to work with goes all the way from a shulker at Y level negative 2095, right above the kill barrier in a max height world, up to Y level 30 million, the hard-coded highest point players can be at in Java Edition. Subtract Steve's height of 1.8 meters, and that gives our boat stack 30,2093.2 meters of vertical space. Which brings me to the final suggestion, because while that's how tall it can be, all of these friends wanted to see how wide we could make it if we shaped it like an inverted pyramid instead of a pillar. Players cannot lay on top of other players, so we need to alternate layers of the boats and the people, maximizing the horizontal space each layer takes up so we can pack as much stuff as possible in the next one. Player hitboxes and boat hitboxes are both square, meaning the total area of each layer will also be square. If you've ever seen this image, you know that packing squares into a bigger square isn't always a perfect grid, but like I said earlier, there isn't a general solution to the packing problem. So I'll assume it's all grids for now. Plus, that makes the number of items in each layer a perfect square, which helps a lot with the math since now we only have to measure one side. Let's start with layer 1, the boats right on top of Steve's head and the players on top of those. For the boats, it's pretty obvious to tell that we can fit 4 of them in a 2x2 grid, but like I said before, we need to maximize the area, and to do that, we need to figure out how far apart we can make them. The player's hitbox is a square of length 0.6 meters, and each boat has a hitbox of length 1.375 meters. The edges only need to overlap a tiny bit for things to rest on top of each other, so if we say all but 0.01 meters of that box is off the edge of Steve's head, that puts the boats 0.58 meters apart from each other, and makes the total side length of the first boat layer 3.33 meters. Technically, that margin can be as small as we want, as long as it's within the floating point precision, but numbers smaller than 0.01 won't affect the final result much. That makes the size of each layer super easy to predict. Each player layer will have a side length 1.18 meters larger than the boat layer below it, and each boat layer will have a side length 2.73 meters larger than the player layer below it. To find out how many items are in those layers, we can just take the side length of the layer, divide it by the size of the item, 0.6 for players, or 1.375 for boats, drop the decimal to find the length in hitboxes, and square it for the total count. The last thing we need to figure out is how many layers there are. We have 30,2093.2 meters to work with, and every combination of player and boat layers has a combined height of 1.1625, 0.6 for the players and 0.5625 for the boats. The players at the very top cannot be laying down since there's no boats on top of them and no way to place blocks up there, meaning the top 2 layers will have a combined height of 2.3625 meters instead. So, we can subtract that from our total height, divide by the height of all the other layers, and add 1 to the result to re-include that top layer, to find that we'll have 25,808,251 layers each of boats and players. We already have all the basic math on how to figure out the contents of those layers, so after writing a short script to work through it, we can find that our maximum boat stack has 46 sextillion boats and 243 sextillion players. We deal a lot with huge numbers that are impossible to conceptualize, so I want to take a moment to appreciate just how many people that is. There are 8 billion living humans on this planet. If every single one of them made 8 billion Minecraft accounts, it would still be less than 0.03% the number of players we need to make this boat stack. But you guys wanted theoretical, and that's about as theoretical as it gets. Time to tally it all up. If we hop on a server and invite every living insect 2,000 times, equip everyone with maximum armor, grind them all to max levels, fill out their inventory, feed them a pile of gold apples 3 times the weight of the sun, do some war profiteering, befriend 0.8 moles of parrots, deforest 65 billion earths to make boats, fill them all with silverfish, and assemble the mighty boatstack, then, after accounting for gravity, the new total weight that Steve can lift in vanilla survival Minecraft without modifying the game is 15 quadradecillion, 280 tridecillion, 676 duodecillion, 724 undecillion, 340 decillion, 705 nonillion, 347 octillion, 673 septillion, 767 sextillion, 695 quintillion, 244 quadrillion, 649 trillion, 159 billion, 952 million, 279,105 kilograms. These numbers are gonna kill me. Which is 145 quadrillion quatanewtons, we ran out of prefixes, 33.6 quadradecillion pounds, or 12.7 tridecillion 2,500 elantras. That takes us from the 0.3 solar masses Steve was squatting last time, all the way up to 7.7 quadrillion solar masses. Meaning, we have Steve lifting 5,000 times the mass of the Milky Way galaxy, 6 times the mass of the Virgo galaxy cluster, and a significant fraction of the observable universe. Or, in more understandable units, he can lift 12.2 quadradecillion bottles of 1998 Chateau Cheval Blanc, 4.04 nonillion times the amount the Terrarian can lift, 84.9 tridecillion Harambes, 3.82 sexvigintillion electron neutrinos, 402 tridecillion Garguras, 1.13 tridecillion wax lightly weathered cut copper stairs, 804 octillion Polans, 15.6 tridecillion 1994 Mazda Miatas, 1.8 billion Sagittarius A-star black holes, and 318 tridecillion of this guy's wife. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. I know not everyone is a huge fan of sponsor segments like this, but I like talking about funny math. If you made it this far, clearly you like listening to me talk about funny math, and these guys want to pay me to talk about funny math. So, if you're interested in military history or comprehensive strategy games, or if you're like me and just think tanks are pretty neat, check it out with the links in the description and the pinned comment. And don't miss out on the bonus pack for new and returning players on PC and consoles. That's it for this time, but it still isn't his true limit. The series isn't over, and we still have a few major things left to cover. It's only gonna get more ludicrous. Subscribe so you don't miss the next part, like the video if you like the video, and in the comments let me know what units you understand, how you feel about the April Fool's stuff, and if you have any ideas about those potion ingredients. If you want to help me figure out what counts as adding weight and how much weight it adds, or if you just want to chat, come say hi on Discord, link in the description. And in the meantime, just know, Minecraft Steve is really running out of gym equipment. Stay nice, everyone.